Is it a benefit of God to think you receive strength from your imaginary friend? This video maker seems to think so, but he's wrong. Completely wrong. But what else is new? I stumbled across this video by, and I admit I'm probably going to get this wrong, so please forgive me, J.M. Kuczynski, I don't know, where he asserts that the feeling of strength that some people get from God makes the whole thing worthwhile. And that's like saying the feeling of invulnerability you get from taking PCP makes doing so a good idea. Instead of dealing with reality, people want to live in a fantasy world that doesn't give them an accurate picture of the facts. But facts are inconvenient, right? So let's see where this goes and why absolutely no one is impressed.
Belief in God has one very significant benefit. Those who believe in God claim that God gives them strength.
So what? This is an empty claim that has no objective meaning. Anyone can claim that a certain belief gives them a certain feeling. That doesn't mean that it actually happens in any objectively verifiable way. I could say that believing in the flying spaghetti monster gives you the ability to read people's minds. That doesn't make it so.
They tell themselves, God is on my side. His strength is my strength.
So they're deluding themselves. That's no surprise, considering what they believe. How is any of this a real effect that can be proven objectively and empirically?
Imagine someone with the same degree of self-confidence who did not believe in God.
There are massive numbers of people that you can point to who are very self-confident, who don't believe in any gods or don't believe in your God. We can also point to tons of people who do believe in your God, who clearly don't have that supposed strength. So this is a vague, unprovable claim regardless.
That person's position would be, I am great all by myself. I have God-like greatness, not because God is on my side, but because I am God-like.
But since there's no reason to think that God even exists, it's just delusion no matter how you look at it. You have one person with an overactive ego and someone else who thinks that the all-powerful creator of the universe is watching over them. These really are not significantly different when you think about it. It's two people with serious mental problems.
The latter person is an egomaniac and a social pariah.
Not true. In fact, some of the most popular people around are people with overactive egos. That would describe the vast majority of our celebrities and politicians. People who are very full of themselves and think they're wonderful people. So wonderful, in fact, that they want people to vote for them, to put them in power, and fill movie theaters to watch them on a big screen. These are not remotely social pariahs, unlike a lot of religious fanatics who are incapable of going 5 minutes without talking about Jesus. Those are the social pariahs. Methinks you've got it all backwards.
The former person is seen as an appropriately modest person and is not a social pariah, but they are both equally self-confident.
No, in fact, you are completely wrong. By definition, the people who think that they're getting their strength from God cannot be self-confident because their confidence does not come from within themselves, but from their imaginary friend. I'm not sure this guy knows what any of the words he's using mean.
It is irrelevant that the one attributes his strength to God, whereas the other attributes it to his own ego. Or rather, it is relevant, but in a way that redounds to the benefit and the credit of the believer in God, and to the discredit and disadvantage of the non-believer.
That makes no sense whatsoever. And in fact, this is a problem that I've noted in the past, where the religious really take no credit whatsoever for their own accomplishments and abilities, instead pretending that their imaginary friend is responsible for all the good things that happen, and that their own sinfulness is responsible for all the bad things. They take none of the credit and all of the blame, which is simply not psychologically healthy. Now, certainly, someone's ego can be completely overblown to the point of being an egomaniac and therefore being an insufferable prick. But the reverse is equally true. Someone can be so entirely self-effacing that they are utterly miserable to be around. I'd much rather be around someone with a healthy ego and a healthy sense of self-worth than someone who is convinced that an imaginary man in the sky is the only reason they continue to breathe every day.
By virtue of believing in God, the believer can, without weakening himself with narcissism, have the excess of self-belief that is needed to tap into one's strengths.
How does one do that if they're convinced that they have no strength without God? Because while I will agree that excessive narcissism is problematic, so too is the belief that you cannot function on your own, which is exactly what many theists do. Because while narcissism is one extreme, the other extreme is codependency. It is the belief that you cannot function without, in this case, God. Religious codependency is a recognized mental illness. Symptoms include hiding behind religion to mask personal flaws and failures, blaming bad things that go on in your life on religious causes, insisting that it's your job to make God happy, and insisting that your own unhappiness is required for a satisfying relationship with God, or claiming that you are worthless without your religion. And I find it interesting that our apologist here is going to extremes for narcissism, yet apparently not recognizing that harmful extremes exist on the other side as well. And this is, of course, a fallacy called the appeal to extremes. Here he compares the extreme of narcissism to people who are generally emotionally healthy, instead of comparing the extreme of narcissism to the extreme of religious codependency. It's just dishonest.
And by virtue of not believing in God, the non-believer cannot, without so weakening himself, have that degree of self-belief.
But the vast majority of people don't have that degree of self-belief because it's not healthy to do so. Religious codependency is not healthy. It's not something that anyone ought to aspire to. But if you're going to compare two positions, at least make sure they're comparable positions, not one extreme and one not.
So belief in God makes it possible for people to get the better of their own insecurities and to draw on their own powers without alienating their peers and also without becoming grandiose.
But if you're drawing on your own powers, you're not relying on God, are you? So where he gets the idea that you're getting strength from religion is entirely beyond me. Either you have strength or you don't. If you think you're getting it from some imaginary man in the sky, you're being delusional, not emotionally healthy, just as if you're being narcissistic, you're being delusional, not emotionally healthy. But for people who are simply emotionally healthy, people who know where their actual strength comes from, God doesn't even enter into the picture.
And this is surely one of the primary purposes, psychologically speaking, of belief in God.
If you're talking about unhealthy psychology, maybe. It sounds like he's trying to use belief in the supernatural as a coping mechanism for emotionally weak people. And that's not healthy. It's lying to yourself because it's easier than just dealing with reality. The reality is, whether you want it to be true or not, that we have no rational reason to think there's any such thing as God, and neither do you. Just because you want to think strength comes from God doesn't mean that it does. It's just a delusion. It's an emotionally comforting lie that you tell yourself because it makes you feel good. And for some reason, you seem to be fine with that.
Those who believe in God do so not so much because they have erroneous metaphysical beliefs, but because they want to be able to tap into their own strengths without either weakening themselves with narcissism or antagonizing their peers.
Neither of which they actually get from God. So he's even admitting that all of this is a lie. What's wrong with this guy? And that's why, at least as I record this guy's video has absolutely no upvotes. All downvotes, all negatives, because his ideas are so absurdly ridiculous, nobody can take them at all seriously. When I say that the religious are just rationalizing their way to their beliefs, this is an excellent example, because it makes no sense at all if you just look at it intellectually. But once you flush your brain down the religious toilet, I guess it makes some kind of crazy sense if you squint at it just right and don't think about it too hard, or at all. And the religious wonder why we don't take them seriously. This is why. But they don't care one bit. As far as I can tell, the video maker hasn't answered a single objection in his comments at all the time this video has been up, because he's got nothing intelligent to say. But I'm sure that he hasn't changed his mind any, because there was never any mind involved in his beliefs to begin with. Psychologically, belief in an imaginary father figure in the sky is insane. It fits the very definition of the word delusional. But because they're trying to rationalize the belief, not actually justify it intellectually, whatever insane spin they have to put on it to make it sound a little less crazy, they'll do it. Why? Because facts don't matter, only feelings do. And this is just one more example of why religion is such a problem, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't actually solve any issues, it just causes people to act irrationally. It doesn't matter if you're religious or if you're just a religious accommodationist, you're still wrong. Religion is stupid, and if you believe it, so are you.